you mentioned my full name is actually Reverend Chris Wylie. My pronouns are he and they. I'm a queer, gender expansive, disabled United Methodist elder, musician and songwriter, wheelchair user with cerebral palsy. I reside in Western New York, and a brief image description is that I'm a middle-aged person with long blonde or long brown hair, blue beard, and glasses. I'm wearing a dark shirt, and there are various instruments and a tabletop Christmas tree still sitting behind me. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Christian, would you be willing to introduce yourself next?
Yes, I would. And hi there, everybody. Thank you to Ophelia and to RMN for having us here tonight. It is such a pleasure to be here with all of you. My name is Christian. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a community college student, and I am a music major at Bucks County Community College. I am planning on graduating this year with with my my associate's degree in music. So I'm feeling good about that. And I am also a disability and LGBTQIA plus advocate, um, and a mental health advocate as well. Um, and and I am connected to the UMC because I am a member of the Virtual Church of the Young Prophets, which is pastored by J.J. Warren. And it is a church that is led by and for young people and allies of all ages. And so I am happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Christian. And I also saw some hands raised up in applause when you said that you were a musician. I guess we've got a few musicians in the house
Oh,
today.
yeah.
That's thrilling. All right. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, Christian. Justin, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Reverend Justin Hancock. I am I am the co-founder and lead instigator. Christian would want me to say that of the Julian Way, a ministry which unintentionally both of my colleagues are members and friends of the Julian Way as well. We didn't do that on purpose, we promise. Uh, but we're a ministry with, for, and by those with disabilities. And I'm an advocate and a disability advocate, uh, disability activist, excuse me, as well as being a queer United Methodist deacon living in the Dallas Fort Worth area with my wife and son, and getting up to mischief and causing trouble in as many spaces as I can. So I'm honored to be here today.
And we're honored to have you here today. Thank you so much for all of the mischief and ministry that you do. Yeah, the Julian Way is enormous for Methodists and disabled folks and Christians all around. I would love to know anything that LGBTQ affirmation, sorry, has taught you about disability affirmation. So, or in other words, what has disability affirmation taught you about queer and trans affirmation, or vice versa? Um, Christian, would you be willing to take it away with that?
Yes, I would, absolutely. So to begin, I'll say that I feel like that there are so many things I could say to answer this question, and I'm sure Reverend Justin would know that as well. We have talked about this at length, but I will give you the summarized version. So I first experienced ableism when this little boy in my neighborhood, along with his friend, they called me the R word slur, and I will not repeat it here, but you all know what that is, I'm sure. And so soon after that, I felt more self-conscious about the way that I looked, and I felt the need to make sure that no one would suspect that I was disabled. And so for a while, my goal was to blend in, quote unquote, with other non-disabled people, especially since my disability is considered mild, and sometimes people can't tell that I'm disabled. So this sort of works in my favor sometimes, but then other times it really doesn't work because some parts of my disability are visible. So at the time, I did not know what the R word meant since I was a little boy at the time. So I asked my mom about it. And so she spoke to the two boys and she educated them about why the word is harmful. And one apologized when he was asked to, and I could tell that he felt guilty. And the other did not, and did not express any guilt. And so this experience really shaped how I view disability. And so as I grew older, though, my mom and my physical therapist were talking to me about how identifying as a disabled person could lead to good things in my life if I ever chose to do that. And I remember my physical therapist saying to me, quote, "Your universe will just open up." And she was right. So with their encouragement, I began identifying as disabled at 17 years old. So I was done with camouflaging as someone able-bodied. And so a couple of years later, I learned from another person with a disability. She taught me how to write songs. And so I was able to write a song about my experience called "It's Okay to Be You," where I share about my disability journey. And what's interesting is that as I've shared the song with other people, I shared the song with others, one of whom is a mom of a transgender kid. And she said to me that she thought that the song was really encouraging to her because she always appreciates when she listens to songs that really embrace other people's differences. And so over time, around this time, I was also interested in finding an expression of our faith that would embrace compassion, critical thinking, and rich theology. And so I read a bunch of different articles, including from Rachel Held Evans and from a United Methodist minister, John Pavlovitz. And so I really liked what he had to say about various topics. And so over time, I knew that I wanted to become a disability and LGBTQIA+ advocate in the UMC. I even went to a disability theology webinar hosted by the Association of Ministers with Disabilities. And so that really inspired me because I learned there that there were some Christians back in time who really believed that having a disability was a sin. And I really couldn't believe it because I thought Jesus made it very clear that he loved folks with disabilities in the Gospels. But so I wondered how could there be debate on this? And then I realized that the answer lies within ableism. And lastly, I will say that I believe ableism and non-affirming LGBTQ theology intersect, since 70% of neurodivergent people identify as part of the queer community, and some would say that the number is as high as 90%. And what I think that our friends in our denomination and and in the wider church don't often realize is that when they say that the LGBTQIA plus community is not part of God's kingdom, what they're unknowingly saying is that a large part of the disability community is not part of it either. Despite the many people, in some cases with higher support needs, who love Jesus with all of their hearts. And so that is why I have sought to become the best LGBTQIA plus ally that I can be, because I think it is part of disability ministry.
Wow, Christian, I never thought that I would say the words that math will preach, but what you said about how the sheer number of people who are placed into their identity excluded from the grace of God because of who they are, that puts it in such stark reality. Thank you. Really appreciate your thoughtfulness. Justin, I wondered if you wanted to share anything about what LGBTQ affirmation or identity has taught you about disability affirmation, or what disability affirmation has taught you about queer and trans affirmation. But I'll also say that there is a question from the chat. One of our participants today has asked for you to please tell us a little bit about the Julian Way. So you can answer one or both of those, whichever you would like.
I'm happy to talk about the Julian Way, but if I could ask if we could do that close to the end, because I want to give the conversation we're having with room to breathe, because I could get on the Julian Way soapbox and be there forever. So
All right. Well,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I came to this work. I came to both sides of this work relatively recently. I was raised in a fairly middle of the road, but very conservative West Texas United Methodist Church that has since decided to make their political stance in this conversation more public, which is unfortunate. But throughout my college and seminary career, I just felt God beginning to unpick what I knew about my disabled identity and what I knew about queer allyship and eventually my own queer identity. Uh, I was raised in an able-bodied household. All my friends are able-bodied. My parents are able-bodied. My parents are special educators as well, or my mom is. So they never hid my disability, and they always told me to take pride in who I was from a very early age. But all my brothers are able-bodied. My twin brother, until about 10 years ago, was able-bodied, and he's recently had his own disability journey as well. But so I didn't really, except for 2 weeks in summer camp, I didn't really identify as disabled. And then as I got into adulthood, I began to notice the inequity and the inherent ableism in our society. And I remember being unemployed for 9 months after graduate school and going on dozens of interviews and always in the room being told, "You're at the top of our list. We're going to call you back. You absolutely crushed it." And then I would leave the room and they would clearly have discussions about what I was capable of and how I was so inspiring, but I wouldn't get the job. And I remember telling a pastor one time, I know I'm inspiring. I also need to freaking eat.
Ooh.
Um, and but to tie that in to, so I thought coming out of seminary, I was gonna do college ministry because I'm good at college ministry and I love young people. But that was really, and I did college ministry at the Texas Tech Wesley for 2 years and I loved it. But God persistently started to pick on me about, why aren't you there for your people? Why aren't you, you know what you should be doing? And then my wife and I found our way into intentional Christian community around 2012. And I began to think, what does this have to do with disability ministry? And how could an intentional Christian community stand in the gap for the disabled? And as I was going through that process, I also was finding further deliverance or further freedom, I should say, from the way I viewed queer people or queer persons growing up. And God began to turn my heart when I was in seminary, and I eventually said, I just can't be on the wrong side of history in this regard. So if I'm gonna love disabled folks, I gotta love queer people as well. And I'll wrap it up here because that's a long story. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, it hit me that uh, I I wasn't just like um, open to queer people, uh, but I was bisexual myself, and that was a long journey to admit that and to come to terms with that. But the Saturday morning I came out to my wife, who had been married to almost 10 years at this point, she was like, and this is her words, she was like, yeah, no shit. I knew that after been dating you 3 weeks. And I wanted to go, and you didn't bother to tell me. Uh, and but since that point, I have noticed what Christian pointed to. Everywhere I look in the disabled community, there are gifts, and there are also queer people. So it's no accident that I'm sitting where I'm sitting, and it's been a long journey, but I can't help but do intersectional work because it keeps showing up on my doorstep. So it's simple, but it's true.
Thanks so much, Justin. Yeah, that intersectional work didn't just show up at your doorstep, it showed up like in your mirror. In this case, I love the kind and I guess kind of humorous words that your wife said. And she said, yeah, no shit. I knew that. I have to believe that that is almost like a Christ-like voice. Like, I knew that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
and that extends. Thank you so much for sharing. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about what queer and trans affirmation has taught you about disability affirmation or vice versa?
Yeah. So much of what my friends and colleagues have just said is so profound and so deep that I won't I won't restate all of their words, but for me, simply, when I look at inclusion and exclusion, I think about love. And when I think about love, I always start with the fact that love works from the margins in. So I can't hide any part of myself, nor should I have to, nor should anyone have to. So, because love wouldn't do that. So, this love working from the margins in works in all these capacities. So, if you're excluded for this or that or both, which, as we're talking about with intersections of exclusion, and that's how some of this conversation came to be, is, you have to push back against that because out in the world, in our denomination, and everywhere, people want to push people out to the margins. But as people of faith, we shouldn't, not only shouldn't we exclude anyone, whether they show up in our mirror or on our doorstep, we should welcome people in. And so that's how this all works for me. When I think about disability inclusion, when I think about LGBTQ, IA plus, exclusion, when I think about how these things go together and the intersections of all that, again, I think about love, and I think about how we're here to lead the way, and we're here to call that out, and we're here to push back and do all these things. And so that's what I'm doing, that's what we're doing. And we're doing it inside a denomination that has had its struggles with that. And we're certainly doing it in a world that struggles with that. I mean, today's Super Tuesday. I don't need to look very far to see all kinds of exclusion on any number of fronts, including disability, including queerness, including lots of things. So I'm going to call that out. And to me, that's how it all goes together. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you challenging us. If I could, while you're still on the mic, I want to ask you a little bit about community building. So I understand that close family is important to you and to all of the members of this panel. I know that whether you're a child or a parent, how you relate to those who love you most, as a disabled person, or as a queer or trans person, like that's just there's a lot, there's a lot there. So I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about disability and family, whether that's created, chosen family, whether that's through virtual community, church community. Tell me a little bit about disability and family.
Well, again, as I was already saying, and I think this is really a good lead into all of that for me, is that that community starts with the people around you, the people who you love. If you want to exclude anyone, you need to go out and meet more people and get to know them and get to know them deeply. And so when I think about family, the people who are placed in my life in this way, chosen or biological or otherwise, I think about all of these things. I think about my daughter who is now 17, and I think about how a few years ago, again, I've already mentioned the politics of all this, and a few years ago, she came to me and said, with all the pushback in the United States here against LGBTQ people and all those things, she was like, how can this happen? And she was crying because she has queer friends, she has, queer family, obviously, and that led to this discussion between us, really, about my own identity, and again, it all works together. I kind of lost my train of thought, but when I think about family, I start by thinking about my spouse. I think about my daughter. I think about the people around me who I love. I think about the people right here in this room who I've gotten to know, Justin being one of them, and I hope Christian becomes another one of those people, because you're awesome. You're doing great things, and it's a privilege to be in your lives and to be together here and elsewhere. So again, when I think about community, when I think about family, I think again about that idea that love wouldn't do that. My daughter's name is Hope. If Hope showed up on my doorstep, I wouldn't turn her away, no matter what, especially not for who she loves, which is an absurd notion to me. You can see maybe there's a little Baptist in me because I get a little fired up at this, but you know, there like it's absurd that to to exclude people because of the gender of somebody to whom they're partnered. It's nonsense. And again, if my daughter shows up, no matter what she's done, no matter what she's been, where she's been, no matter who she loves, she's still my daughter. And I think about that every time, because we're all somebody's child, right? And we're all family together. That's how this works. Because true inclusion starts it can only happen in community. And so again, these are all the things I think about with that. Community is family and otherwise. So thanks.
Love that. Thank you so much, Chris. Christian, I know that you had talked a little bit about the role of advocacy that your mom had played in that moment when she confronted the two kids who had used a slur against you. Do you want to talk a little bit more about family and advocacy and disability?
Yes, I would love to. So speaking of my mom, and she's really wonderful. I love my mom. And when I think about my mom, I think about someone who has really helped form me into who I am today. She has been there for me at every moment, from when I was rushed to the hospital in the ambulance, when I was a little boy, when I could not breathe because I was having asthma attacks, multiple asthma attacks. So by the way, if it weren't for the medical professionals in the ambulance, I would not be here. So I'm thankful, really thankful to be alive.
I am also really, really thankful that you are alive. Christian, I'm not sure if that was the end of what you wanted to say or if your computer may have frozen. Okay, I'm seeing that from other folks in the chat. It looks like your screen is frozen. But if you want to come back and say more about this in a bit, then of course, please feel free to do so. In the meantime, Justin, did you want to add anything about community and love and family? I know that you had talked about the love of your wife, and you talked a little bit about being a parent.
Yeah, I would just like to uh, say that, like my colleagues in this chat, without my family and my mom and dad really stepping in from the earliest age and refusing. They told the story that 2 weeks after I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at 10 weeks, a doctor at Scottish Rite Hospital walked in, and he didn't have to say this, but he said, Justin will do whatever he wants to do, can do whatever he wants to do, so don't ever let anyone tell you he can't. And my mom tells the story of that being an angel, because back in 1981, that viewpoint was extraordinarily rare. It's rare today, and it was minusculely rare at the time. And my parents never let me say no. My brothers beat on me like they beat on everybody else, and I beat on them, and we were brothers, but it's my family that really gave me the start. And then moving into living in community and the queer perspective on things, the best the best time we had living in community was with two persons who were in a same-sex relationship, to the point where one of them stepped in like at a moment's notice when my wife's friend, who was her birthing coach, got called to a faculty meeting. We called my friend Rebecca, and my friend Rebecca was like, yeah, either Amber or I will be there in 2 minutes. And like Angus's aunts have literally, Angus is my 5-year-old. Angus's aunts have literally been in his life for literally since the moment he took his first breath. And that was, if I needed any more pushing, that was another overwhelming proof of God, that God's fruit and God's family can be found in all sorts of relationship. And found family has been everything to me on my journey. So the fingerprints of all sorts of family dynamics and descriptions are all over my journey. Some of it rough, but most of it uh joyous, and all of it to God's glory.
Thank you so much, Justin. That's such grace-filled language that you use to describe the impact of people who have been in your orbit, the fingerprints of family, and family of origin, chosen family, created family. Thank you for that. Chris, did you want to add something?
Yeah, can I jump in just for a second?
Please. Yeah.
First of all, let me tell you the difference between 1968, when I was born, and 1981. The doctor told my birth mom I was actually placed in foster care just to leave me behind, and that, better off just to not think about me. But one thing that I've thought about, that was actually a big part of this catalyst for this discussion, was it started with me talking about it's great when family things go well, but what about when they don't go well? And I talked a little bit about how, like, being disabled, if my family chose to do what happens to a lot of queer kids, and push us away, it would be a totally different. There's extra layers there, because I have care needs. So if you have care needs, and and people don't accept you for who you are, it gets really complicated really quick. But to me, that's even more, without getting into all that. We know that these things happen, and I don't need to delve into all that, but I think that's why created family is also so important. Because when you do show up at a doorstep of somebody and they don't say welcome in, that you need someplace to go, and that someplace is with each other. right? And that's again why love works from the margins in, and that's why intersectionality is so important. Because again, if things don't go the way that we hope, the way that we wish, the way that love would have it go, we need other people who recognize the value of love, the value of family, the value of community, no matter who we are biologically or where we're from, who can also say, you know what, I love you, I'm with you, I'm here for you. That's so important. And I just want to shout out all those people too, because it's great to talk about the easy stories, but I think sometimes it's as important to talk about the stories that are more difficult. But we can take those difficult stories and make them better. We can't erase it, but we can work toward healing it together. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I'm really grateful for the little bit of Baptist in you, because that is such an important message for us to take home tonight. Yeah, I'm not going to get that out of my head for a long time. When love doesn't go right, we're going to need other family and community to step in and love from the margins inward. Yeah, thank you. It's beautifully said. I acknowledge that there is a really fantastic question that's been placed in the chat. And I would love to give that question some preference over some other questions that we had that I just had in my back pocket. So if it's okay with you two, Chris and Justin, I would love to hear your thoughts on this question. This is it okay if I say who this is from, this question? Okay, thanks. This question is from Amy. Amy says, thank you all for this. Christian, I see so much of my own story in yours. I am a queer, disabled, and deaf Episcopal seminarian who left the UMC to pursue ordination and is currently doing work in deaf theology. I wonder if any of you has experiences in the intersectionality of deafness in the church and disability in the church. The deaf community does not affirm for itself the language of disability, but there are a lot of us who live in both worlds. So I'd love to open that question up to you too.
I'll take a run at it. First of all, can you repeat the name so I can the question asker's name?
Sure. The question asker's name is Amy.
Amy, that's such a beautiful, nuanced, and thought-provoking question that I am going to have in my brain for a long, long time after this. To be honest, the relationship between disability and the intersectionality between claiming a disability identity and the deaf community is one that I've been blessed to be working through for a number of years, thanks to my good friend Tom Hudspeth here at Lovers Lane in Dallas. And I have not always found it easy to reconcile the two, frankly, because my way of framing disability is to let folks claim and articulate their own experience, and I want to let the deaf community into the tent as well and have their voices raised and in celebration with us. What I can tell, and so it's been a process for me to be told sometimes several times about the cultural nuances of being deaf, and those that choose to live out of that cultural identity and separate it separated from disability, but what I can tell you is it has taught me to move in every attempt in earnestness to move in every community I interface with respect and grace and a curiosity around, okay, what to you makes the deaf cultural experience unique from disability, and how can we find common ground? And in the vast majority of cases, the common ground comes, as Chris says, from the margins in, and we can all agree that we're trying to articulate the justice of a loving God. But it's been a bumpier process, but still a process full of grace. I don't know if that fully answers the question, but that depends on how the deaf individual you're talking to narrates their own experience as to how much or how little they want to cross streams directly with the disability identity. But it's still a place of beauty for me, even when it's sometimes nuanced.
Thanks, Justin.
Can I just jump in quickly with
Please.
a couple of thoughts? Thanks. And I'll be brief because it's not my experience outside of some tinnitus from being a longtime musician, which is pretty extensive at this point. But we do have some wonderful colleagues who lead the way in deaf ministries. But the one thing that I think about a lot is, and by the way, seek out those people who are involved in the deaf ministries and have more of these conversations. But the one thing I think about in terms of my most visible disability, which is a wheelchair user, is that if the whole world had ramps, would it matter if I use a wheelchair to get around? It wouldn't, not at all. So if, again, I don't want to speak on behalf of anyone in the deaf community, but if you look at it as, oh, well, it's a different way of communication, it's a different language, which is certainly true, right? But it's also true that the way that I move around wouldn't be all that significant if the world was ramped the way that it should be, especially with the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, being 30 plus years in our rearview mirror, so a lot of that resonates with me. I think that's my point, is that, again, this is why we need to keep working toward a more just, a more inclusive world, a more accessible world, no matter how we communicate, no matter how we move, no matter whatever it is. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I want to once again privilege the questions of the participants here, if that's okay with you all, the panelists. There's another question from someone who's here tonight that says, this is such a moving and informative discussion. How can we explore this intersectionality between disability and queer communities to inform our ministries without falling into the trap of being ableist or patronizing?
Is Christian with us, or did he fall off again? Because I want to make sure that.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, I see you down there now. Okay, great.
Yes, hi there.
Do you want to jump in on this question?
Sure, sure. And first of all, I am so sorry for that. My laptop's internet suddenly cut out while I was mid-sentence. Um, and I was also having trouble using social media today, and so was a friend of mine um, across the world. So it seems to be a global problem today with technical difficulties. So my sincerest apologies there. Um, and yes, in regards to this question, I would say that um, I think the best way to avoid ableism is just to be knowledgeable about what it is and and how it can present itself in various ways, and really just to ask folks with disabilities and say, hey, what do you think about this thing I want to say, or this activity I want to do? What do you think? Like, just run it by us first. Um, and then, this way we can both be sure that we're doing effective ministry.
Is it okay if I jump in
Yeah,
quickly?
you don't have
I
to
feel
wait for my
I feel
permission.
that
I'm sorry, Chris.
I feel that, but to me, this is where community building is so important too, right? Because how do you make sure that you don't fall into some of these traps, even well-intentioned, of ableism and things like that? Get to know people, build relationships. That way, you're not you're just having a conversation. You're just having a conversation with somebody who is in your life. So get out and again, meet more people. But to what Christian said, I think that's so important. In the disabled community, there's a saying, nothing about us without us, right? So it is super important that you get the input of disabled people, but also while recognizing that there is no real monolith, I guess. Like there's not like one way of doing, because I might say I I use this terminology, or this is my preferred way of identifying, but somebody else might say, well, I'm not so comfortable with that. So again, talk to the people around you, get to know more people, get to build these relationships. This is where community is so important. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Chris.
Yeah, I would quickly add, uh, number one, I'm so proud of Christian, in the way you articulated that. Uh, Not to be patronizing, but to have a little bit of a proud big brother moment. That was very nicely done, Christian. But uh, and I would offer you a little bit of grace to say that you're probably gonna be ableist at some point. I'm ableist, and I've done this for a living for nearly a decade, 24/7, and I still fall into the traps of being dealing with internalized ableism. So I always, the number one question that the Julian Way gets when we go and do trainings around our anti-ableism curriculum is, how do we not be, two questions: how do we not be ableist, and what do we how do we refer to people with disabilities in a way that's not harmful? And I always say, well, number one, your intent matters a lot, but knowing that we're all going to make mistakes, give yourself some grace that nobody's perfect. And as long as you have made an earnest attempt to foreground people with disabilities and diverse embodiments in the conversation, there's an understanding that we're all on a journey uh, together. So, and as far as how do you refer to persons with disabilities? Well, first of all, my name is Justin. Start with Justin, and that's a good place to start. So it's a journey. Nobody's gonna get it right the first time, but Christian is so correct, and Chris is so dead on. Nothing about us without us, and you know, people with disabilities are waiting to be teachers while not wanting to bear all the burden of having to teach every time, but we're willing to have these discussions. Just ask us.
Thank you, Justin. If it's all right with you, Justin, I wonder if this is a point of natural segue then for you to make good on your promise from earlier to talk more about the Julian way. Would you be willing to share about that?
Sure. So as I said, the Julian Way is a ministry with, for, and by those with disabilities, or as we like to say, diversely embodied realities. And we manifest ourselves in two distinct ways. Um, I should say that we have a core staff of 3 people, myself, um, a young woman, Rebecca Anderson, who is a candidate for ministry in the UCC, and an executive assistant who is my Buddhist Christian utility player of all kinds. And we all of our core staff is uh, not on purpose, but this is the way God works. Queer and disabled. So when we talk about empowering people with disabilities, we really mean it. And the first way we kind of manifest publicly is we do teachings and trainings with churches and communities of faith and secular civic organizations on ableism and on disability, going beyond inclusion to disability integration and empowerment. We have an hour-long anti-ableism training, a 90-minute anti-ableism training, and a 3-hour mega all the bells and whistles anti-ableism training. So we really seek to help communities of faith, most particular, be places of universal accessibility and openness, and to give them a roadmap to help uh, people with disabilities be in positions of leadership, power, and influence. I'm happy to have conversations about this. This kind of stuff lights my fire, helping uh, communities find their way to this. And also, the other way we manifest our mission is we have a group of between 13 and 17, I would say, persons that we are in communication with and community with on a daily basis. Uh, most of them some form of Christian, some of them very much not. But you know, I'm I just and Christian knows this. I describe the Julian way as not universalist, but universal-ish. You know, if you've got some concept that there is something going on and pulling you towards a calling, call that God, call that the Holy Spirit. Call that, as a friend of mine, a queer friend of mine once says, called it the shower goddess. I want to know what that journey is like for you, and the folks in the Julian way want to figure out how to empower themselves and what God is calling us to do as a disabled community. And we offer free spiritual direction to all of our members. And if I could, that's just a way of companioning them towards the fullness of whatever their reality is calling them to be on a daily basis. And we also this year have unveiled our LIFT fund, Life Enhancement and Future Thriving Fund, which is a fund of money that we have that helps our folks do everything from getting our housing, our members that might be dealing also with housing insecurity, getting them meals and food on a daily basis, to helping those who are in our ministry with uh, graduate school and continuing professional education, so that again we can uh, move those who are in relationship with us from unemployment or underemployment to feeling empowered and being able to own their own identity and their own story. So we're a young ministry, we're an evolving ministry. We've got every political stripe under the sun, but we're also we are limber enough that we can be a voice for change, a voice for joy, and a voice for trouble in all sorts of spaces. So I always say it took me about 27 years to get here, but now that I'm here, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And my wife would kill me as a PhD scholar in disability theology if I didn't mention that we're named after Julian of Norwich, 15th century English mystic, and one of our key tenets is one of her greatest principles, that all of God's creation is God's good creation. So that really foregrounds why I'm here and why people with disabilities are just another wonderful expression of God's joy and loving diversity in the world. So that's my pitch for what the Julian Way is.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Justin. I think that a really important takeaway with regards to the earlier question about making sure that we don't become patronizing in our pursuit of being less ableist and less queer and trans exclusionary is that we learn from disabled folks, and also we can pay disabled folks for the labor of teaching the rest of the church. And there's also just like so much good content out there from disability theologians and activists who have a lot to teach us. So if there aren't folks in your midst who are willing to have in-depth conversations about how your ministries can be more inclusive, then there are also books, podcasts, including yours, Justin, and yeah, so many other resources whereby you can learn about queer and disabled intersections from queer and disabled people. I know that we are up at time, and I just want to say thank you so much to the panelists here and also to the folks who are here. Yes, thank you. Thanks so much for leaving the link to the Julian Way and how folks can support it. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for taking the time out of your evening to be together in this chosen community, this chosen family. I hope that this has been a time where you get to hear the Spirit of God moving through this community together. Thank you, Reverend Chris Wylie, Reverend Justin Hancock, and Christian Huber for your time and wisdom and your generosity of spirit. If there's anything left that you would like to say to this group, panelists, then I certainly don't want to stop you from doing that, but did want to say before folks started logging out, if they have to leave, that we're deeply appreciative of you.
I just want to express my thanks also for everyone here and for you also, Ophelia, for guiding our conversation, for being a great partner in ministry and helping pull all these things together, pulling this conversation together. Again, I'm really grateful to be here. I was thinking the entire time that I wish I could just leave my heart emoji up in the corner of my screen because I pressed it so much, and that was me being prudent with it. So anyway, but again, thank you also, and thanks to everyone.
Thank you so much, Chris.
I also would like to say a really big thank you to you, Ophelia, and for everyone here tonight for coming. And it was an honor to share about how we can make the church and society a better place for those with disabilities and neurodivergency. I hope that I can partner with you all in that mission.
I would echo everything my fellow panelists have said. Ophelia, you've been, besides having one of the coolest names ever, and warming a Shakespeare fan's heart and with your name, you've been such a gracious guide on this journey, and this is the most fun I am legally allowed to have, especially considering all the people that came and the panelists with which I shared the arena tonight. I'm very, very full and very blessed. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, all of you, for an evening of completely legal fun. Feel free to check out thejulianway.org to learn more about the Julian Way. And otherwise, if you want to revisit this recording, then it will be in a link that will get sent out to you soon, probably tomorrow. But otherwise, I wish you all a wonderful night. Be blessed. Continue to be a blessing. Thank you for your ministry and your heart. Good night.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much.